Good day, everyone. My name is Randy, and I am the presenter today. What we are working with today is OPC Client Application Programming. We'll talk about programming OPC applications, why it's needed, talk about the toolkits that are available, the pros and the cons. We'll talk about the REST API toolkit, and then the server and client requirements. Finally, I will show you an example of programming using Python very specifically. So here's what we're talking about. We've got a couple of controllers here. It doesn't really matter what they are. We want to take this information from the controllers and bring it in with OPC, as you see over here. And we want to take this information out into an application, in this case, which is what I will show you, using REST API. First thing we're going to do is capture the OPC data. We'll collect this real-time data. We'll set up some services. And finally, I'll show you how to develop an application, a very simple application using Python in this case. So what's the problem we're working with? Well, obviously, there are lots and lots and lots of OPC applications available today. They are commercial, off the shelf. So many applications that are available, but it doesn't really matter how many applications are available. In the end, many people are still doing their own special thing. You need something special, and that means you need to develop your own application. You can't get around it. Everybody at some point will need some custom or bespoke application. So to do that, what can you do? If you need to develop something, what do? Well, you need to get a toolkit. This toolkit, you can develop it on your own. So you can get your own toolkit and you can develop it on your own. I did this myself using C++. It took a very, very long time, and I had myself a toolkit. But there are existing free toolkits. You can go to the website, you can go to GitHub, and you can get free toolkits. They are actually available. Or you could go to OPC Foundation. So OPC Foundation also has a toolkit, and if you're a programmer, if you know what you're doing, you can use the OPC Foundation toolkit. You need to be a member of OPC Foundation, and then you can get access to this toolkit. Or you can get commercial toolkits that are based on OPC Foundation. So you can go to a vendor, pay them a bunch of money, and you can get a toolkit that's based on on OPC Foundation, on the OPC Foundation toolkit. So there are lots of options that are available if you don't want to develop your own toolkit or use one of the freely available ones on the internet. But these toolkits have their own pros and cons. The pros are that they're extremely powerful. They really are. They're highly configurable, and they enable developers to control every aspect of their programs. I've used these toolkits myself. For example, as I said, I developed my own toolkit. I then used OPC Foundation toolkit. And really, I can tell you, especially the toolkit you make yourself, they can be very, very powerful. And they really do enable you to control everything. So what's the problem? Well, they're very powerful, and they do let you control everything. And so they take quite a while to get to actually develop your application. So number one, you have to be a programmer. The development is complex, and it can take a long time to do it. And the developers themselves must also be able to handle the connection states, the connections, and very specifically disconnections. So it's not very problematic. For example, with most toolkits, that you are able to make a connection and get your data. And when everything is working fine, if there were no errors, programming would be a piece of cake. You wouldn't have to do any error handling, and everything would be working just fine. It's the erroneous states that are a problem. We have a connection, but all of a sudden now we have a problem. We were expecting to have that connection keep working, but it doesn't. Now what do? How do we handle that in the programs? The subscriptions, errors, exceptions. This is really where the rubber meets the road. This is what takes time. And any programmer can tell you that if it isn't for finding errors and erroneous conditions, actually programming would be a piece of cake. So, but again, the pros are they are very, very powerful, very configurable, and they do allow you to control every aspect of the program. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes not so much. So let's enter REST API. Now, REST, Representational State Transfer, is what it stands for, and a REST API is an API that conforms to REST design principles. Okay, so what? Well, number one, these APIs are very, very secure. They use HTTP and HTTPS, so they're very secure. They're also used in many, many, many industries, not just in automation. They're used in commercial applications, IT applications. They're used all over the place. If you have an application that gets data on your phone, for example, if it gets data from the internet, likely it's using REST API. It's not guaranteed, but likely it's using REST API. Why do people use them? Because number one, they're independent of the platform you're using. So whether you're using a phone or a PC or a Mac or a tablet, it is completely independent of the platform hardware. It's also, REST API is completely independent of the language you're using. So whether you're using C, C++, C#, you're using Java, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, PHP, whatever, VB, it doesn't matter what language you're using. If they have web access, most likely they're supporting REST API. And of course, the operating system is irrelevant too. So if you're using Windows, it works. If you're using Mac OS, that works. If you're using iOS, that works too. If you're using Android, that also works. So pretty much every operating system can handle REST API. So it's very, very independent, very portable. And very importantly, it's meant for a stateless operation. Stateless. What do I mean by that? You can be, for example, on your phone, you're taking a flight from London to New York. You are on a web page in London. You close your phone because everybody has to turn off their phones during flights, of course. You take your flight, you land, you haven't had a connection for many hours, and you land in New York as an example. And here, all of a sudden, you turn your phone on and you keep on going with your session as if nothing happened. Your phone doesn't really know and doesn't care. Your applications don't care that there was a disconnection. It is stateless. You can also, as a nice little example, you can take the URL you're on, you can send it to another machine that's never been on this website and immediately make a connection. So these are fairly easy to implement and deploy, even for starting programmers. So even people who are just starting out, it's fairly easy to do. So on the server side, what's needed? So here we're talking about getting data. So we have an OPC server. This is the REST API server in this case, right over here. What do we need? Well, for operating systems, we're talking about Windows. And why Windows? Because this guy might be OPC Way, or it might be OPC Classic, which of course needs Windows. So whether you're using Windows XP all the way to Windows 11 or Windows 2003, all the way to the latest Windows Server, Windows 2022, there's support for OPC UA and OPC Classic, and it runs as a Windows service, meaning it runs automatically without a logon, and it's always running. And it manages all OPC server communication. So all the security, for example, is managed right over here. If there is security, so for example, maybe you're connecting to an OPC Way server that doesn't use security, maybe you're using an OPC Classic server that does have security, that's all managed right over here with OPC Way or with COM/DCOM. And over here, it only uses one port using HTTP or HTTPS. So port 80 for HTTP or port 443 for HTTPS, or whatever port your web server happens to be using. And of course, you have complete control over the port you're using. So this is on the server side. The client side is over here. So on the client side, and you notice I've got a little cloud because this can really be anywhere. It can be local on your own intranet, it can be on the internet, it can be wherever you really want it to be. So as I said, the client could run on any platform, using any language, using any operating system. I've already talked about that just a few minutes ago. These are fairly easy to develop. So here you can use whatever integrated development environment, or whatever, I should say, whatever development environment you want, whatever language you want. REST API is independent of all of this. And I will show you, it's very, very few lines of code, and there are many REST API examples all over the web. In fact, OPC Expert's own components use REST API. It's pretty neat. I'll show you. And it, of course, uses only one port again. So what that means is there's only one incoming port over here and no incoming ports open over here. So from a security perspective, it's actually very, very easy to get these configured. You don't need any open ports over here. Think of tunneling on steroids this time. This is just directly into your application. Okay, now the architecture, this is a fairly big image here, so let me just walk you through it. So here we have at the bottom a couple of controllers. In this case, if this is a control with an OPC UA server embedded, then OPC UA comes right out. And I'm just giving a couple of examples. Or in this controller here, it's got an OPC Classic server over here, so it's OPC DA coming out of here, all going right into here. Now this guy's got OPC UA, a UA server, it's got a DA server, a REST API server, so all sorts of different MQTT, all sorts of different ways to get the data out, a whole bunch of different ways to get the data in, and a bunch of different ways to get out. In this case, I'm just focusing mostly on REST API with an OPC UA example here on the side. So again, you take information in, you bring information in using OPC UA or DA in this case. You can read data, and of course you can write, and I'll show you both of these. And the information can get out via OPC UA as an example, or REST API as you see in this case. Now, your applications, where can they be? So with REST API, you can, for example, put your application on some kind of a box. Here I'm showing you Linux as an example. Maybe you've got Python over here, or Java, or C, C++, whatever it is you want over here. This is your application. You program it whichever way you want. If it's, for example, on a phone, so here's a phone example. You might have a mobile app here. So maybe you're using JavaScript as an example. Or you've got some web app on a PC. And again, this can be Windows or Mac or Unix again, whatever flavor of Unix, whatever it is you want. And you communicate using REST API, and I'll show you this API. It's pretty simple to use. So again, I'm showing you a bunch of different platforms over here, all coming in with REST API, and you can read data and you can also write data. Folks, keep the questions coming. I'll handle those at the very end. So again, let's do a little example here where we've got a couple of controllers. They're going to bring in data via OPC. We'll do OPC UA and OPC DA. We'll bring that data into our into OPC Expert. From there, we'll send the information out to an application using REST API. So I'll show you the capturing of the data. I'll show you how to collect this real-time data and how to develop this application over here. Now remember, what we want is for this guy over here to run as a service. So these things really need to run as a service because they need to run all the time. They need to run automatically without anybody being logged on. For those that are interested and are asking, and I have a whole bunch of questions, asking about the recording of the webinar. Yes, this recording webinar, the recording will be made available to you at the very end. Okay, so let's go take a look at this. So what I've done is I've got a PC right over here, nice and simple. So everything is nice and simple. There is OPC Expert. Now, just before we begin this, I want to show you, we go to where OPC Expert is. So when you download OPC Expert, you just get the executable. And when you run it, it's just an executable. You see, there's nothing installed here. There is nothing from, let's see here. We'll go to Task Manager. You can see there's nothing running from OPC Expert. You can see there is an OPC sample server. This is coming from OPC Foundation. I will also connect to a Kepware OPC server, which is actually running right here. But most important for this topic here, we do not see anything with OPC Expert. So there's nothing from OPC Expert running here. Because, as I said, what you're getting is just an executable. So there's no installation, there is no installation, and there are no changes to Windows registry. So you can very, very easily remove it if that's what you want. So you can use it on audited systems. Okay, so here is OPC Expert. Now watch, I'm just going to run this guy. And what it does is it extracts all the files it needs. So there it goes, it's running. It extracted all the files it needs. And again, at the very end, if you don't want it, then just delete all the files. Don't need this anymore. Let's go over here. Okay, so here we've got OPC Expert. This is the GUI itself. This guy here is the system tray icon right here. Okay, so from here, and just to make things simple, I'll just exit this. So you can just see there's the OPC Expert executable itself. Again, most important, the salient point here is there is no installation required. Okay, so let's go set up for REST API communication. So what I'll do is go to Tools, Options. In fact, before I go to Tools, Options, I'll expand this PC just to show you what's here. So you can see we have a couple of DA servers right over here. And we have some UA servers. So you can see we have some UA servers right over here. So 3 UA servers, 2 DA servers. So let's go and install something. We're going to set up. So I'll set up the services here. So what we want is the REST API. So we want REST API, and I'll run it as a service right here. And you can see that it automatically checked OPC Expert UA server. So we've got OPC Expert UA server. We've got the REST API server. Now, if you want to try this out, check this out yourself, but you don't have OPC servers yourself, you can use OPC Expert Simulation Server right over here. You can just set this up to run as a service. You can have a UA server or a DA server, depending on what you want. So I'm not going to do that here just to keep things simple, but you can do that, and then you can get access to an OPC server just in case you don't have one. In any case, you click OK. Before I click OK, I want you to look here. So again, you can see there's OPC Expert.exe. That's this GUI here. But as soon as I click OK, we're going to see 2 new servers. So here I clicked OK. So there's OPC Expert UA server, which will stop, and it will start again. And we will also get OPC Expert REST API server. There it is, right there. OPC Expert REST API server. So there's the REST API right over here, and OPC Expert UA server right over here. So this is our GUI. So we actually don't need this any longer, but I'm just going to use it for easy configuration. Okay, so now that you've seen this, let's make this a little bigger. There we go. Let's connect to a Kepware server over here. So let's see what we've got here. Those of you that have watched the videos before, you know that we've got quite a few items over here. I'll subscribe to custom, flow, instrument. So just a few items. You can see the data type over here. We're subscribed at 1 second updates. Again, there's no programming or anything. This is the REST API server itself. I can go look in there, but I'm not interested in it right now. I'm going to go to the sample server. This is from OPC Foundation, sample server. I'll go to data, dynamic, scalar, and I will get byte value. There we go. I'll collapse this. Go to static, scalar. I want a value that doesn't change, and I'll take this int16 value. There we go. So what have I done? I've got these 3 items here that are coming from the Kepler server, and these are coming in using OPC DA. So you can see it's coming from the Kep server, and these 2 are coming in via OPC UA. So we've got an OPC UA and an OPC DA connection. Okay, time to get to REST API. Let me just begin with OPC DA. So I'll take instrument as an example. It's a nice and simple number. Here, watch this. We right-click it. And you've seen this on previous videos. We looked at the before I get started, just want to take a look, do a quick test. So we select these items. You notice 2 UA items, 2 DA items, 1 UA items. We'll right-click and we will trend. So here we go. This actually tests the entire REST API system. Very, very easy, simple to test. And here we see a trend. If you can see a trend, then it means we are in fact working. So everything is working. We can see the trend going on here. We can see the values coming in. And this, I've just tested the REST API server. In fact, this whole form here, all of this is using JavaScript. So even OPC Expert's own components use JavaScript. It's an easy way to test. We can see in here, there we go. We can see the real-time values and we can see them coming along. So now we know everything is working well. So this trend, just doing the trend, immediately tests everything out. Okay, all done. So we know things are working. Now let's get to REST API. So take instrument, right-click, REST API command. And what I want to do is generate a code snippet, and specifically I want to read. So we've got built-in examples for C#, Java, JavaScript, Visual Basic, and Python. So it doesn't matter which one you pick, you'll get code in that specific language. So of course, other languages are supported. OPC Expert doesn't care. It's agnostic of the language you're using, but we just have built-in code for these languages. And if you guys want other languages specifically, we can provide you code for that. Okay, now what I'll do, actually, just before I get this, I'll go into Notepad. There's Notepad. Okay. So once again, go to Instrument, REST API command, generate code snippet, and specifically I want to read code. If, for example, I do C# and I right-click, again, this is just to show you, you actually see C# code you can put into your Visual Studio. But I'm not interested in C# in this case. I want to do Java, not Java, Python. So there we go. REST API command, generate code snippet, read. Now, why Python specifically? Because so many people know Python. So we figured that would be a neat little thing to show here. Okay, so there is the code snippet you get right over here. Now, what I'll do is save this. So I'll go File, Save As, and actually, let me just save it on the desktop, and I'll save it as example, save. You notice nothing is formatted particularly nicely here. Save. So what I'll do is rename it. I could have renamed it, of course, and save as, but I want to show you there's nothing special here. So I'll call it .py, which is Python. Are you sure you want to change it? Yes, I sure am. Okay. There we go. I'm just using this here for reference. So here we go. Example.py. You notice Windows automatically knows it's Python and will edit it with IDLE, the Integrated Development Learning Environment. Okay, so here we'll edit with Python. There we go. And now it's just formatted a little bit nicer for us. We can see this. There we go. Okay, what is this code doing? So we got some comments here to help you with your troubleshooting, your diagnosis. I'll just get rid of those. They're not particularly important. And now you're starting to see how small this code actually is. And the magic line here, this is the line where you're actually reading the value. That's really all it is. This line right here. So what you can see is it's a GET request, and here is the URL right here. So this is my IP address. I'm going to the Kepler server, and specifically I'm going to the instrument item right here. So you notice there is the item ID, and that's the item ID. I'm doing instrument, so that's this guy right here. Right? Okay, so, and I'll show you how to get this. Very, very easy. So all it's doing is it's reading that value, getting it into a JSON object, and then going inside, and for each item, we're going to print out the value. So you can see the value. This is how you get the value, the quality, there's the quality, and finally the timestamp. And that's all you will need to do. There, that's the edge of the line. Okay, so let's run this. So we'll go run module. It'll ask us to save. Are you sure you want? Yes, yeah, we'll save it. And there we go. We're running it, and just like that, you can see that you're reading values, just like that. Here we are. We're reading values, and they're the same values. As we see over here in instrument. Right, so you can see there's the value, printing out the quality, and in fact, the timestamp too. So the value, the quality, and the timestamp. All right, so it's really that easy. This is a nice little reading example. I'll read this guy too over here. Now, what I could do, hang on, we'll close this. Yeah. Okay, now here, what I'm going to do is, so I've got instrument. Now, what I actually want to do is to get flow. So for flow, again, what I could do, of course, is REST API command. I could generate the code snippet, and I can read. So I can generate this whole thing again. But you've seen that. That's old news. So what I'll do is I'll just copy the item ID. So I'll copy the item ID for flow. There we go. Now I'll go to the item ID. I'll take this. Now you notice it says instrument. So that's instrument. We've got this instrument. I'll go right click and paste. And here we go with flow. That's all there is to it. So we've got flow. And I can run this again. Of course, it'll ask us to save. And here we go. Now we're getting the flow values. See that? We're now getting the flow values. Just like we have over here. I'm showing the value, the quality, and the timestamp. Really nice and easy. Okay, so what I've shown you here are a couple of read examples, and you can see how easy it is to move from one to another. Just to give you an idea here, if I want to go to OPC UA, all it takes, and keep in mind where I'm clicking is really relevant, just where the menu is showing. So I'll go to REST API, and again, I'll copy the item ID just like this. So it's not this item here, not flow, but right-click, paste, and here we go. It's a different item. We'll go run. So just like that, I'm moving from OPC DA to UA. It can be local. It can be remote. No problem at all. There we go. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense. OPC UA, OPC DA makes no difference whatsoever. Just give a different item ID. All right, so now we have done a read. Let's go do a write. Oh, Lourdes, can you do a code snippet for multiple items? Yeah, of course you can. You can just select multiple items and generate your code snippet. So nice and easy. Okay, so let's go. I'm just keeping it simple here, though. So what I want to do now is write. So I'm going to write in here just to show you what a write example looks like. So we'll go REST API example, generate code snippet, this time for writing. And again, I'll use Python. So there we go. We'll select everything, right click, paste. Okay. Now, once again, you get the nice little. We'll get rid of these. These will really help you out to diagnose and troubleshoot, but we don't need them at this point. Here we go. And just like that. Now, I'll just take you through the code really easy. I didn't mention before, but these imports, everything is standardized. There's nothing that you need from OPC Expert for these imports. These are all standard libraries that come with Python, so you don't need anything special from C#, Java, JavaScript. Everything is right off the shelf with your existing libraries. You don't need anything. We start off with the value being 0. Then what we're going to do is we write this value. So the magic is right here. You can see ampersand value equals the value, which is this guy. So it starts off being 0. Then it reads that item. So it writes it. Then it reads it. And then it flips the value to 1. So it'll go 0, 1, 0, 1. It'll wait 2 seconds for every time it does this. So here's what we're going to do. We'll run it. Run module. Save. Okay. And here you can see that we're writing a 1 and a 0. And what's kind of cool is you can see it right in here. You can see 0 and then 1 and then 0. And we wrote a 0 and then we write a 1. Sure enough, it's a 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Great. So you can see what it is to actually write it in. Now, I will write into, this is writing into OPC UA. Let me write into OPC DA right here. So again, I'll go to REST API command, copy the item ID just like this. In fact, I'll do it a slightly different way. So you saw already, if I copy the item ID, I can get the endpoint as an example, specifically for writing. Copy to clipboard. And so that's the endpoint, the entire endpoint right here. There we go, we pasted. So we can do just the item ID or the entire endpoint, whatever is easier for you. It's designed to be easier. And that's all there is. So we go run module. Okay. And here we go. You can see that we're writing a 0, a 1, a 0, a 1. So that's right over here this time. And let me just make this a little bit easier because by default, the timestamp takes a little bit more. So I'll just remove this. There we go. Great. So here's the value, 0, 1, 0, 1. And you can see this guy right here is actually changing. So 0, 1, 0, 1. You can see this one is not changing because we're not writing there anymore. And there we go. Nice and easy to do. Okay. And we'll close it. Okay, so there you see it. What we've done is we've done a read and a write. So both reading and writing using Python. But again, I want to point out that this can be done in any language, although we do have specific examples, specific code snippets for these languages here. And by the way, if you're on the website, if you're downloading, getting the latest, just make sure you have this version here or a later version. So just make sure your versions are aligned. If you don't see these options, make sure you get the latest the latest version. Okay, so from here, let's go back. Let's finish off. So I showed you the demo. We'll just finish off, and then I'll get back to your questions. So in the inform portion. So those of you that need to go, just hang on. I'm going to tell you how to get this presentation, getting help, and so on. So what we saw is we were able to get data using OPC Classic and OPC UA. We saw that we were able to write an application. Keep in mind, this application can really run anywhere. Using REST API, we saw how to capture data, collect the real-time data, and develop the applications. One thing I want to point out, of course, that was the demo, but one thing I forgot to show is, watch this. If I run module, so I'm running this, and you can see that we're writing the values, but as I said earlier, these are services. You can see it's running as a system account. We actually don't even need the GUI. So even when I close the GUI, you can see that we can still read and write just fine. You can see the GUI isn't running, and the only thing that's running here are these two little guys running as a Windows service. You can see they're taking really no CPU here to do all this. This is very, very quite efficient. Okay, so that's what we've seen. All right, now to get some help with automated troubleshooting, you can download OPC Rescue. You can download OPC Expert. These things will give you the ability to do some troubleshooting. This is all free. And of course, if you download OPC Expert, you will also get this REST API server that you can play around with, and you can get data, again, to your phone immediately. Oh, and I'll show you an example that you can do on your phone right away without any programming. I'll do that when we go to the informal section. Okay, with OPC Expert, you can trend, you can bridge, you can tunnel, you can do all sorts of activities. Specifically, we looked at REST API just now. We looked at the trending. I'll show you something else that's kind of cool about trending. So all this stuff is available for free. You can download it right now. Also, to get some hands-on learning, it's all vendor neutral. You can earn your certified OPC professional designation. You can come to one of our hands-on workshop where you learn how to configure OPC, specifically with DCOM and OPC UA. You troubleshoot these systems. You learn how to apply the security, and you learn OPC best practices. You actually get two computers that you configure yourself. You troubleshoot them. You get things working, and then we mess things up for you. And you have to figure out how things are broken and fix it. It's a whole bunch of break, fix. It's really interesting, a fun class, very, very interactive. These workshops, there is no travel. They're online. There's no travel. These classes are interactive with a live instructor, and they're live remote classes. They are not recorded. We've got public classes, and we also have private classes, private training for you and your colleagues. If you want something specifically for your company, we tailor these trainings specifically to your company. And you can take a look at the dates at opcti.com. Of course, we also can travel to you and come to you and do this in person. Okay, very last slide here before we go to the informal section. I'm going to send you, you're going to get an email with a link to this webinar recording. You should get this tomorrow. So you'll get a link to this webinar recording and you can watch it. You'll get a link to OPC Expert, to the download, and you'll also get an invitation to our next webinar, which specifically is talking about OPC calculations. You'll see how to make an OPC calculator, where you can get as inputs multiple OPC DA and UA items. You can then perform mathematical calculations on them. Very, very Excel-like. If you've used Excel, you'll recognize this right away, but no programming necessary at all. You can do your own calculations. Really, really neat stuff here. So an OPC calculator and no programming involved. All right, everybody. This ends the formal portion of our webinar. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to go to the informal section where I'll answer the questions I didn't answer during the webinar itself. If you have to go, please go ahead. We'll send you a link to the webinar recording. And I hope to see you at the next webinar with OPC calculations.